Congratulations, honey. She's the woman of the future. You're really only good for paying the bills. That's exactly what my husband said in front of his entire family at his 43rd birthday dinner while holding the hand of a blonde woman in high heels and a tight red dress who was smiling like she had just won the lottery. The entire table fell silent. 15 people staring at me, waiting for me to cry, scream, make a scene. I did none of that. I just smiled, the kind of smile that confuses people. I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair, stood up slowly and said, "You're right, Richard. I really have paid a lot of bills, even ones you don't know exist." His expression changed. For a second, I saw fear in his eyes, real fear, as if he had just realized he had made a terrible mistake. But it didn't last long. He let out a nervous, forced laugh, the kind people use to hide their discomfort, and went back to hugging his mistress. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, my eyes dry, my chin firm. I got into my car, locked the doors, waited for my breathing to calm down, and called Mr. Andrews, the lawyer who for 6 months had been meticulously preparing for everything my husband thought was his. "Michael," I said, my voice firm and controlled. "You can start tomorrow." The restaurant was one of those expensive places in Soho with low lights that cast shadows on the walls, dark polished wooden tables that reflected the candlelight, and waiters dressed in black who moved like silent shadows between the black tables. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, with the smell of Napa Valley Cabernet and overly expensive perfume, the imported kind that costs over $300 a bottle. It was November, that crisp New York chill before the first real snow, and I could feel my silk blouse sticking to my back, a nervous sweat trickling down my neck, even with the heat on low. My heart was beating so hard I was sure the people around me could hear it like a drum echoing in my chest. My hands were trembling slightly, but I held them steady, almost rigid, gripping the handle of my genuine leather Michael Kors bag. The same bag I had bought with my own hard-earned money from my salary as a purchasing manager for a supermarket chain. I was 41 years old that day. 41 years of life, 18 of them beside that man. I had straight shoulder-length brown hair, which I tied up myself every morning in a practical bun because I had no time for the salon nor the patience for elaborate care. My clothes were simple but well-maintained, always clean and pressed. My nails were short, unpolished, because I worked with my hands and it was pointless to try to maintain them. My makeup was light, just nude lipstick and a little mascara. I've always been one of those women who go unnoticed, the one who works hard, wakes up at 6 a.m., gets home at 7 p.m., and still makes dinner, who takes care of everything and everyone, but who no one really sees, no one notices, no one values. Richard was at the head of the table, as he always liked to be, occupying the place of honor, the center of attention. He wore a light blue designer dress shirt, no tie, 2 buttons undone, to show off the graying hairs on his chest that he thought were charming and made a point to display. His hair had too much gel gray at the temples, a style he thought made him look mature and interesting. A prominent beer belly that he could no longer hide even with well-cut dress shirts. He smiled broadly with those pearly white teeth I had paid to have whitened 3 years ago in a treatment that cost $1,500. The woman next to him, this Jessica, must have been 28 at most, maybe even younger. A bleach blonde with that artificial yellow tone, false eyelashes so long they seemed to touch her eyebrows, and that artificial tan of someone who spends her days at the gym and in a tanning booth. She wore a red dress that barely covered her thighs, so short she had to adjust it with every move, and a neckline that left little to the imagination. Her fingers had long red acrylic nails, very expensive, and she touched my husband's arm with every sentence, laughing too loudly, cackling exaggeratedly at jokes that weren't even funny. Richard's mother, Vera, 7-year-old woman with a permanently sour expression, sat on the opposite side of the table looking at me with the same contempt she'd had for me since the day we met. Next to her were Richard's 2 brothers, Frank and Junior, with their respective wives, all pretending this situation was completely normal, as if it were natural for a married man to introduce his mistress at his own birthday party. There was also the youngest sister, 5-year-old, Brenda, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable staring down at her plate, picking at her food without eating. The trigger came when the waiter brought the cake. A huge 3-tiered cake with a shiny Belgian chocolate frosting adorned with those handmade sugar flowers that cost a fortune and are only made by specialized bakeries. Richard blew out the 43 small candles that formed the number 43. He blew them out with his usual theatrical flair, and as everyone clapped politely, he pulled Jessica close possessively and gave her a kiss. A long, deep French kiss in front of everyone in front of me, his legal wife of 18 years. And then he dropped that line, the line he had thought about, planned to say, rehearsed in his head, just to humiliate me in the cruelest way possible, because that's what he did best, humiliate me. In recent years, it had become a sport for him, a pastime, a form of entertainment. But this time was different because this time I was prepared. I had saved every piece of evidence, every document, every bank statement, every recorded conversation. I had opened an account at an online bank he didn't know existed, one he would never imagine I used. I had been slowly transferring funds for 2 whole years, money that was legally mine but that he thought he controlled. And I had hired the best family law attorney in New York City, a 5-year-old man with perfectly cut gray hair and impeccable Italian suits, who had looked me in the eye during our first consultation, held my hand and said with conviction, "Mrs. Patricia Adams, when I'm done, your husband will have to ask for permission just to breathe." When I walked out of that restaurant, I looked back one last time. Richard was watching me through the glass window, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something different on his face. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was pale, worried. I met Richard in 2005 at a graduation party for a mutual friend who studied engineering. I was 22. I had just graduated with a business degree from NYU, and I was full of ambitious plans. I wanted to travel the world, build an international career, live alone in my own apartment, be independent. Richard was 24, working as a salesman at a luxury car dealership in Manhattan, and he had that charming New York hustler vibe that I found funny at the time. He was friendly, talkative, outgoing, and knew how to make people laugh. He asked me to dance, made me laugh all night with exaggerated stories about crazy clients at the dealership. And at the end of the party, he asked for my number with his usual confidence. He called the next day and the next and the next. 2 months later, we were officially dating. In the beginning, he was attentive, even romantic. He would pick me up from work, bring flowers to my apartment on Sundays, take me to simple but charming restaurants in the village. He introduced me to his whole family at a big barbecue in the backyard of their house in Queens. His mother Vera was already giving me sideways glances back then with that judgmental look. Too educated for my son, I heard her whisper to a sister-in-law when she thought I wasn't listening. But I ignored the comment. I thought that with time as we lived together, she would accept me, value me, see that I was a good person for her son. What a naive illusion. Richard proposed to me in a simple restaurant near Central Park, nothing too elaborate, with a modest ring he paid for in 12 installments on his credit card. I said yes because I thought I truly loved him. Because I thought we would build a life together, a family, a future. Because I was young and foolish enough to believe that love was just that good feeling in your stomach, that pleasant anxiety, that thrill when he arrived. We got married in 2007, a small but beautiful party in a rented hall in Brooklyn. Simple decoration with white flowers and candles. My parents, who were always humble, my father was a city bus driver, and my mother, a self-employed seamstress who worked from home, made a huge financial effort. They sacrificed years of savings to pay for half the party. Richard's family contributed the other half, but Vera made sure to make it clear, repeating several times that this was a generous gift from their family and that I should be eternally grateful for all their kindness. We moved into a small, rented 2-bedroom apartment in Park Slope. Simple furniture bought on credit from a local store, basic pots and pans we received as wedding gifts. I worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at a logistics company on the east side, and Richard continued selling cars at the dealership. In the beginning, we split the bills fairly. He paid the rent, I paid for groceries and utilities. Each contributed what they could, but slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly, that began to change. First, he said sales had dropped due to the economic crisis, and he needed me to help a little more with the rent that month. Then his car mysteriously broke down, and he needed to fix it urgently for work. Then his mother was sick with high blood pressure, and he needed to help with expensive medications. There was always something, always a new excuse, an emergency, a need. And I always helped without questioning much because that's what wives did right. They helped, supported, held things together. That's what my mother had taught me. In 2010, I was promoted to purchasing coordinator at my company, and my salary doubled overnight. I received a generous bonus of $10,000 for exceeding all my targets from the previous year. With that money, combined with my savings, I made a down payment on our own 3-bedroom condo in Carroll Gardens, a growing, family-friendly neighborhood. I put the property in both our names because we were married and because I still firmly believed we were building something together, a family asset. Richard was ecstatic when he found out. He celebrated as if it were his own exclusive achievement. He called his entire family to share the news. The whole family came to visit the new condo the first weekend, and Vera, for the first time in 3 years of marriage, gave me a hug. A fake mechanical hug, but it was some sign of acceptance. We spent the next 5 years slowly furnishing that condo, buying a piece of furniture here, another there. And believe me, I was the one paying for most of it. The solid wood 6-seater dining table that cost $2,000 me. The 6-0-inch TV in the living room that Richard wanted so badly me. The custom-built wardrobe with mirrors and drawers for the master bedroom me. But the name on the invoice was always Richard, because he was the one who made the decisions, negotiated prices, with the salesman, went to the stores himself to choose. I just transferred the money into his account for him to make the payment. What a fool I was. What an idiot. The years passed quickly, and Richard slowly changed. Or maybe he had always been that way, and I was just too blind, too in love to see it. He became arrogant, conceited, self-important. He started criticizing me for absolutely everything. My clothes were too old out of fashion. My hair was dull without style. I was fat, needed to lose weight, go to the gym. I didn't know how to cook properly. The food was either too bland or too salty. I wasn't feminine enough, didn't dress up, didn't wear high heels. I worked too much and didn't take proper care of the house, leaving everything dirty. But when I took a day off to clean the entire house from top to bottom, he would complain that I wasn't advancing in my career, that I was getting complacent. It was never good enough, never enough. Nothing I did pleased him. He started going out more and more frequently. Beers with the guys, he'd say. Watching the game at the bar, an important meeting at the dealership. He always had a ready excuse, a reasonable explanation, and I, like a love-struck idiot, believed everything. Until 2016, when I caught him. It wasn't cinematic like in the movies. It was pathetic and painful. I came home early from work because I felt sick, a terrible headache, and found compromising messages on his phone, which he had forgotten on the living room sofa. Explicit messages to a woman named Brenda. Not his sister, a different Brenda. A young saleswoman from a clothing store at the mall. Explicitly sexual messages, intimate photos, detailed plans to meet during their lunch break while I was at work. I confronted him that same night when he got home. And you know what he did? He laughed. He laughed in my face mockingly and said I was crazy, that I was making things up in my head, that I was getting paranoid from working so much. "Are you sick, Patricia?" he said with conviction. "You urgently need therapy. You're seeing things that aren't there." That broke me completely. For weeks I questioned my own sanity. Had I misread the messages? Was I really going crazy, paranoid, sick? Was I inventing an affair in my head? But I wasn't. And deep down, I knew it. But I wasn't ready to leave, to end it, to face it. Financially, I could leave. I had a good salary. But emotionally, I was destroyed. I was ashamed, deeply ashamed, to admit that my 9-year marriage had failed. Ashamed to prove Vera right, who had always said I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Ashamed to disappoint my parents, who had placed so much hope in that marriage, who had sacrificed financially for the wedding party. So I stayed. I swallowed my pride and stayed. And he continued to cheat on me. Other women came after Brenda. He didn't hide it as much anymore. He got careless, sloppy. He'd come home with a different perfume on his neck, with red lipstick marks on his shirt collar, with stories that didn't make sense. And I pretended not to see anything. I pretended because it was easier, less painful than facing the cruel truth. In 2019, I was promoted again, this time to regional purchasing manager, an important position. My salary went up to $120,000 a year. I was finally earning good money, really good money, traveling all over the country, visiting suppliers, getting professional recognition, being respected at work. But at home, I was completely invisible. Richard barely spoke to me during the week. We ate dinner in heavy silence, each staring at our own plate. He slept with his back to me, right on the edge of the bed, as far away as possible. Sex had become a rarity. It happened once a month maybe. Mechanical, without a kiss, without affection, humiliating. I felt used, discarded like an object. But I kept paying the mortgage and condo fees. I kept putting food on the table every day, kept washing his clothes, ironing them, organizing them, because that's what I had learned since I was little. That's what wives did. It was my obligation. Then in January 2023, my maternal grandmother, Grandma Marie, passed away. She was 89. She lived a long life, spending her last 5 years in a private nursing home that my mother and I paid for together. I was her favorite grandchild, the only one who visited her religiously every Sunday. She left a will, and in that will she left me everything she had saved over a lifetime of hard work. An old but well-maintained house in Queens, worth about $160,000 on the market, and a robust savings account of $70,000 that she had saved, penny by penny, throughout her life, selling clothes at a local market. A total of $230, 000, a fortune. Richard knew nothing about it. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him because something inside me, some primitive survival instinct I thought I had lost years ago, told me to keep quiet, to keep it a secret. The probate process was underway, slow as always, but I had already received a significant portion of the savings. I opened an account at another bank, a modern online bank that he didn't even know I used that he would never discover. I put everything in there, every single cent. And that's when everything started to change drastically in my head. I realized I had a way out. I realized I didn't need him for anything anymore. I realized that for the first time in years and years, I had real power, financial power, the power of choice. But I didn't act impulsively. I did something much better, much smarter. I started planning meticulously. I searched the internet for the best family law attorneys in New York City. I read dozens of client reviews. I saw real cases they had won in court. I found Mr. Michael Andrews, a renowned lawyer with a luxurious office on Park Avenue and a solid reputation for being absolutely relentless in complicated, contentious divorces. I scheduled an initial consultation in March 2023. I went alone during my lunch break from work when Richard thought I was in an important meeting with suppliers. The office was everything I imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows, brushed steel, modern minimalist decor, an incredible view of the bustling avenue below. Mr. Andrews was a tall, slim, elegant man with thin-rimmed glasses who greeted me with a firm professional handshake. "Please have a seat. Tell me your story. Take your time," he said, gesturing to a comfortable leather armchair. And I told him absolutely everything. The multiple affairs over the years, the public and private humiliations, the money I transferred into his account that mysteriously disappeared, the assets in both our names that I had paid for alone, the substantial inheritance I had recently received that he had no idea about. Mr. Andrews listened in complete silence for nearly 2 hours, taking meticulous notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he took off his glasses, calmly cleaned the lenses, looked directly into my eyes and said, "Patricia, you have a very strong case, extremely strong. If you do exactly as I say, follow my every instruction to the letter, you will walk out of this marriage with everything that is legally yours, and he won't be able to do a single thing to stop it." I signed the retainer agreement that very day without hesitation. I paid the initial fee of $10, 0 inches cash with the clean money from the inheritance. And I left that elegant office feeling something I hadn't felt in years: genuine hope. Hope for freedom. Over the next 6 months, I systematically and methodically gathered evidence. Screenshots of compromising messages. I had made a full backup of that fateful 2016 conversation and all the others that followed over the years. Suspicious photos he posted on social media from places he claimed not to be. Check-ins at hotels and restaurants. Detailed bank statements showing huge expenses at luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, and pricey gifts I never received. I recorded important conversations, nothing illegal, just normal conversations, where he was present and aware, which could clearly prove his pattern of abusive and manipulative behavior. I carefully collected receipts for absolutely everything I had paid for over the years: appliances, custom furniture, renovations to the condo, everything. Mr. Andrews was meticulous and professional. He ordered an official appraisal of the condo by a licensed appraiser, which was now valued at $850, 000, due to the real estate appreciation in the area. He meticulously tracked our joint account and discovered that Richard had surreptitiously withdrawn $56,000 over the last 3 years without my knowledge or consent to spend on his mistresses. This had a specific legal name: dissipation of marital assets, and it was legal grounds for him to have to return every penny in the division of property. We also discovered that the car he proudly drove, a brand new 2020 Honda Civic he claimed to have bought with his own money, had been financed with my name as the primary cosigner. And I was the one religiously paying the monthly installments via an automatic debit he had set up in secret. I didn't even know my name was on it. Mr. Andrews smiled with satisfaction at this discovery and commented, "He's arrogant and stupid. That combination always makes our job immensely easier." Meanwhile, at home in the condo, I continued to be the invisible, obedient wife. I cooked every day, cleaned the house on weekends, paid all the bills on time. But inside, internally, I was completely different, transformed. I had a powerful secret, and that secret gave me inner strength. Every time Richard humiliated me, and he continued to humiliate me constantly, calling me fat, ugly, old, saying, "No man in the world would ever want me." I would smile secretly to myself because I knew exactly what was coming. I knew that soon he would lose absolutely everything, and that kept me mentally sane, balanced. In September 2024, just 2 months before the fateful dinner, Richard started getting bolder and more careless with his new mistress, this Jessica. She was different from the others, younger, bolder, more demanding, and he was completely obsessed with her. He started talking about her openly at home, as if he were testing me, provoking me. "I met a very interesting girl at work," he would say casually. "She's full of positive energy. It would do you good to have some of that energy." I pretended not to hear. I pretended to be busy with my phone, with my work, with anything else. But Mr. Andrews was hearing every word because I was discreetly recording everything and sending him the audio files to analyze. And then came the invitation to his birthday dinner. Normally, these birthday parties were held at Vera's cramped house in Queens. But this time, Richard insisted on an expensive, sophisticated restaurant. He paid for the reservation and the dinner, or rather, he took the money from our joint account to pay, which technically meant I was paying for half of everything. He told me to dress well because there would be important people at the dinner. I knew something was coming. I didn't know the specific details, but I knew he was going to do something cruel. Mr. Andrews had warned me clearly. Men like him need an audience for their cruelty. They can't humiliate in private. He will do something public soon. When he does, that's our cue to act. And he did exactly that. In that chic restaurant in Soho, in front of his entire hypocritical family, he humiliated me for the last time in his life. And it really was the last time, because when I walked out of that place and called Mr. Andrews from the parking lot, things started moving at a speed I never expected or imagined. "You can start tomorrow." That's exactly what I said on the phone, still sitting in my car in the restaurant's parking garage, my hands trembling with adrenaline, but my voice firm and resolute. Mr. Andrews responded immediately. "I've been anxiously waiting for this call, Patricia. See you tomorrow morning. Get a good night's rest because tomorrow the war officially begins." I couldn't sleep a wink that night. I drove home slowly to that condo I had bought with my money that I had furnished with my sweat, where I had lived for 18 long years of marriage, and I methodically packed my bags. 3 large suitcases with my clothes, important documents, and personal items with sentimental value. I left everything neatly packed by the door of the guest room we barely used. Richard came home at 3 a.m., drunk, stumbling, reeking of women's perfume. He didn't even notice the suitcases sitting there. He collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and passed out immediately. I spent the entire night on the living room sofa, wide awake, staring at the white ceiling, feeling an intense mix of fear and excitement, because I knew that from that moment on, my life would never be the same again. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I was at Mr. Andrews's elegant office. He already had everything prepared, organized, planned. First thing he said professionally, "You're moving out of the condo today. I've already rented a comfortable flat for you in Brooklyn Heights, very close to your work. A spacious bedroom, living room-equipped kitchenette, covered parking, all furnished and equipped. Paid for 15 days in advance. After that, you can decide at your leisure if you want to stay or find another place." I blinked, surprised by the speed. "But won't I lose my legal right to the condo if I leave voluntarily?" He shook his head. "Not at all. You are leaving solely for your emotional and psychological safety, and we are going to document this officially. Today at 3 p.m., you will return to the condo accompanied by a court-appointed officer whom I have already arranged for, and you will officially and legally remove your personal belongings. He will draw up an official report. Your husband will be officially served notice that you have left, but that you retain all your rights to the property. Furthermore, today I am filing the formal divorce petition with a request for immediate legal separation and an urgent temporary restraining order to prevent him from dissipating any more assets or money until the final division is settled. The joint account will be frozen by the court. The condo cannot be sold or mortgaged. The car cannot be transferred to a third party. He will wake up tomorrow morning to find he has no access to anything." An intense shiver ran down my spine. "He's going to be absolutely furious." Mr. Andrews smiled confidently. "Yes, he certainly will. But anger is not a valid legal argument. Let him be as furious as he wants. The more he loses control emotionally, the better for us in the proceedings. Angry, out-of-control men make serious mistakes. And he made several. The court officer accompanied me to the condo at 3 p.m., on the dot. Richard was there in old shorts and a worn-out t-shirt, watching television on the sofa. When he saw the serious man in a dark suit behind me, he stood up, confused. "What's going on here?" I said nothing. The officer formally introduced himself and explained in a firm voice that he was there to officially document my removal of personal belongings from the marital home. Richard started laughing nervously. "You've got to be kidding me, Patricia. Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It's no joke," I said with the firmest voice I could muster. "I'm leaving, and I'm officially filing for divorce." His laughter died instantly. "You don't have the guts to do this." "I already have," I said calmly and picked up the 3 suitcases that had been packed since the night before. The officer noted everything down in detail, took several photos of the condo's general condition, and kindly escorted me to my car. Richard stood frozen in the living room, white as a sheet, completely stunned. For the first time in years, he didn't have a comeback. But the best part, the most satisfying part, came the next day. Mr. Andrews had prepared a devastating surprise. In addition to the divorce petition and the restraining order to freeze assets, he simultaneously filed a lawsuit for reimbursement due to dissipation of assets. He meticulously compiled all the irrefutable proof of the $56,000. Richard had secretly taken from the joint account all the provable expenses, with mistresses all the expensive gifts, luxury hotels, romantic dinners, and Dallin, formally demanded that he return everything with legal interest and monetary correction. Furthermore, he legally requested that the division of assets be disproportionate. I would get 70% of the estate and he would get only 30% precisely because of the proven dissipation. And the perfect cherry on top, Mr. Andrews discovered through his investigation that Richard had opened a shell company for automotive consulting in his name 6 months prior, improperly using money from the joint account, and that this company had a lucrative contract with the dealership where he worked, a completely fake company to illegally divert commissions and not share them with me. This has a name: fraudulent concealment, a federal crime. Mr. Andrews requested a full and detailed investigation of his finances. When Richard received all the official paperwork, he completely lost it. He called me 23 times in a single day, sent 57 desperate text messages. All were carefully documented and sent to my lawyer as evidence. He called me crazy, a traitor, a gold digger. He said I would deeply regret it, that he would destroy me in court, that I was nothing without him, a failure. But I had powerful allies. And not just Mr. Andrews. There was Claudia, my best friend from college, whom I had stopped seeing in recent years because Richard didn't like her. He was jealous. "She's a bad influence on you," he would say. "She's too much of a feminist, too radical." Claudia was also a lawyer, a respected specialist in labor law. And when I told her everything over coffee, she was absolutely furious. "I warned you years ago, Patricia. I told you repeatedly that man was a complete piece of trash, but you wouldn't listen to me." She was completely right, but she held no grudge. On the contrary, she hugged me tightly, let me cry on her shoulder, and said with determination, "Now we're going to finish him for good." Claudia personally introduced me to an experienced private investigator, a retired NYPD detective who had a discreet office in a less glamorous part of Midtown. His name was Frank. He was about 50, bald, with a prominent beer belly and a piercing gaze that seemed to see everything, to read people. "Your lawyer has already done the legal part very well," he said pragmatically. "I'll do the extra legal part. Nothing illegal, you can rest assured. But we will find out absolutely everything about your ex-husband. Everything. Where he goes, who he talks to, how much he really earns. If he has hidden assets, secret accounts, everything. The complete package cost $5,000. I paid without a second's hesitation. Frank worked tirelessly for 3 intense weeks, and what he uncovered was pure, invaluable gold. Richard didn't just have that one shell company Mr. Andrews had found. He had 2. The second one was cleverly registered in his mother's name, Vera. More systematic diversion of money, more criminal concealment. Frank also discovered that Jessica, the show-off mistress, was pregnant, 2 months along, and Richard had been paying for her very expensive health insurance plan with money from the joint account before the court freeze. Frank discovered that Richard had opened a secret Bitcoin account, cryptocurrency, and had transferred the equivalent of $24 digital currency to this wallet. Naively thinking no one could trace it, Frank could. He even got the complex address of the digital wallet and found out that Richard was secretly planning to buy a smaller apartment in Jessica's name for after the divorce was official, and he lost everything. But he wasn't just going to lose everything. He was going to lose much more than his limited imagination could conceive. Because Mr. Andrews took all this explosive information, included it in detail in the court file, and requested an emergency hearing for fraudulent concealment during an ongoing divorce proceeding. The judge, a serious woman in her 60s, tough as nails, read everything carefully and granted it immediately. A warrant was issued. Richard was arrested spectacularly at the dealership, where he worked in front of absolutely all of his colleagues. Handcuffs, a police car, the full treatment. He spent 3 full days in jail. Vera desperately managed to get a criminal lawyer who paid a high bail of $10,000 money she took from her own savings, and he was released provisionally. But the damage to his reputation was definitively done. The luxury car dealership fired him summarily for just cause. After all, being arrested for fraud and concealment of assets isn't exactly the resume a luxury car salesman wants to have. Jessica disappeared completely. Blocked him on everything: phone, WhatsApp, social media. After all, she hadn't signed up to date a poor, unemployed criminal. She wanted a guy with money, status, stability. And now Richard had none of that. The shell companies were discovered and exposed. The hidden assets were all found. The secret Bitcoin account was discovered and frozen. The condo where we lived was reappraised by another appraiser, and with the impressive appreciation of the real estate market, was now worth $950,000. 70% of that was $665,000. Mine. The car was in my name as a cosigner, and I was the one paying all the installments, so it was legally mine. The joint account before the freeze had $19,200. Half of that was mine by right, $9,600. But since he had criminally dissipated $56,000 over the years, he legally owed me that entire difference. Not to mention the shell company that had profited $13,400 inches its last 6 months of operation. Half of that was also mine by law. The bill was getting extremely expensive for Richard, and he was getting more and more desperate with no way out. He tried to call me again insistently from his mother's number because I had permanently blocked his. I answered this time just to hear what he had to say. "Patricia," he said. And his voice was completely different. Weak, tearful, pathetic. "For the love of God, stop this. You're completely destroying my life." I remained silent for a long moment, letting him suffer. Then I spoke calmly. "I am, or you are. What did I ever do to you that was so bad for you to do all this to me?" I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a bitter, sad laugh, the laugh of someone who has heard something too absurd, too surreal. "Richard, you systematically cheated on me for 8 straight years. You humiliated me publicly and privately. You took my hard-earned money and happily spent it on other women. You introduced me to your pregnant mistress in front of your entire family and said I was only good for paying bills. And you're seriously asking me what you did wrong." He was quiet for a few seconds, then said weakly, "I can change. We can start over. I'll break up with Jessica immediately. I'll drop everything. We can sell the condo, split the money fairly, and each go our own way. No fighting, no lawyers, no complicated proceedings." "No," I said firmly. "Why not?" "Because you don't deserve a fresh start. You don't deserve anything. And because I don't want to split anything. I want everything that is legally mine, and I'm going to get it." The settlement hearing was officially scheduled for December, 3 weeks after his arrest. It was at the family court in downtown Brooklyn. A gray, ugly, charmless building full of nervous people waiting for hearings. I arrived on time with Mr. Andrews, dressed professionally in black dress pants, a pristine white blouse, and a gray blazer. My hair was in a perfect bun with light professional makeup. I wanted to look serious, professional, credible. Richard arrived late with a lawyer his mother had hired in a hurry. A fat man in a wrinkled, stained gray suit who was sweating profusely on his forehead. Richard was physically different, transformed. He was thinner, almost skeletal, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble. He looked at me when we entered the small hearing room, and this time there was no more arrogance, only pure fear. The judge was the same one who had reviewed his case weeks before, Judge Margaret Fonseca. She looked firmly at both sides of the table and said, "So shall we attempt a friendly settlement?" Richard's unprepared lawyer began to speak nervously. He said the marriage had unfortunately ended, that it was natural to divide the assets, and that the best thing for everyone was 50% for each, and to be done with it. Mr. Andrews didn't even flinch. He simply opened his leather briefcase, pulled out a massive stack of documents about 4 inches thick, placed it heavily on the table, and said calmly, "Your Honor, as you can see in detail in the court records, this is not a simple case of asset division. It is a very serious case of systematic dissipation, criminal concealment of assets, illegal diversion of funds, and the creation of shell companies to hide assets from his wife. We have irrefutable proof of absolutely everything. Complete bank statements, screenshots of compromising messages, company contracts, witness statements. The defendant used money from the joint account to finance his mistresses, including paying for the health insurance of one who is pregnant. He used his own mother's name to hide an illegal company. He opened a cryptocurrency account to hide $24,000. This man does not deserve 50% of anything. The room fell into a heavy, absolute silence. Richard stared fixedly downward, not daring to lift his eyes. His lawyer nervously shuffled through his papers, sweating even more. The judge read a few documents, intently raised her serious eyes, and said, "Mr. Adams, do you have anything to say in your defense?" He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer whispered something inaudible, and then Richard looked directly at me and pleaded, "Patricia, please, I messed up badly. I admit all my mistakes. But you can't leave me with absolutely nothing. I don't have a job anymore. I have nowhere to live. My mother is sick because of all the stress from this situation. I'm begging you, let's just split it 50/50 and end this once and for all." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, and then I spoke, looking directly into his eyes without wavering. "No, just that. No. Nothing more." He blinked, confused. "No, no." I repeated firmly. "I worked hard for 18 years. I paid for this entire condo. I furnished it. I held things together while you blew money on mistresses. I endured humiliation after humiliation. I endured emotional abuse. And now, you want me to feel sorry for you? No, never. You will not get 50/50. You will get exactly what the court orders, and if it's up to me, it will be the bare minimum." The judge looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw a clear glint of approval in her eyes. She banged her gavel firmly on the desk and said, "As there is no possibility of a settlement, the case will proceed to final judgment. The next hearing is in February. Until then, the temporary restraining order remains in full effect." And that was it. We left. Mr. Andrews shook my hand warmly and said, "You were absolutely perfect." But Richard didn't give up yet. He never gave up easily. He just changed his strategy. A week after the failed hearing, he showed up unexpectedly at my workplace. I was leaving the office at 6 p.m. When I saw him brazenly leaning against my car, my heart pounded. I thought about screaming, calling security, but something made me stop. I approached slowly and said firmly, "What do you want here?" He held up his hands in a false gesture of peace. "Calm down, I just want to talk for 5 minutes. We have nothing to talk about. Please, just 5 minutes." I looked around cautiously. There were people leaving the building. I wasn't alone. 2 minutes, I said. He sighed deeply. He looked tired, defeated, aged. "Patricia, I know I messed everything up. I know it perfectly well. But you have to understand, I'm not a bad guy, I got lost. Jessica, the others. All of that was a mistake, human weakness. But deep down, I always truly loved you. I felt the urge to laugh or maybe cry. I wasn't sure. You loved me, I love you. I do. You have a very funny way of showing love." He took a step forward. I immediately took a step back. "Don't come near me," I said threateningly. He stopped. "I'm completely desperate, Patricia. My mother had a massive stroke because of the stress of this whole situation. She's in the ICU. I have no money to pay for the private hospital. Jessica had an abortion and blocked me. I lost my job. I have absolutely nothing. And you think that's my fault. No, it's not your fault. But you can help. You were always good, always too generous. I was, and you shamelessly took advantage of it. Then give me one last chance to fix everything." I looked at him closely, and for the first time I truly saw him. Not the man I had loved 20 years ago, not the husband I had desperately tried to save. I saw a weak, manipulative, pathetic small man. "No," I said calmly. "You've had all the chances in the world and you wasted every single one of them. Now you have to deal with the consequences of your actions alone." He clenched his fists. The mask of the repentant man fell for a second, and I saw pure rage. "You will bitterly regret this," he said in a low, threatening voice. "You'll see. I'm going to sue you for slander, for defamation. I'll prove in court that you lied about everything. You'll do what exactly I interrupted, and this time I was the one who took a step forward, challenging him. What are you going to do, Richard? You have no money, no decent lawyer, no proof. Everything you had, you lost because you're stupid, because you're arrogant, because you thought I would stay quiet forever, being your doormat, your maid." He turned white as a sheet. I continued, "You completely underestimated me, and now you're paying the high price for it. And you know what else? I'm not going to regret it for a single second, because for the first time in years, I'm sleeping well at night. I'm eating properly. I'm smiling for real. And it's all because you're no longer in my life." I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw him standing in the parking lot alone, small, defeated. And I felt no pity at all. After that, he tried one last desperate move. He went to Jessica's conservative family and told them that she had coldly aborted his child. Her family, who were evangelical and extremely conservative, were absolutely furious. They put intense pressure on Jessica. To defend herself, she told the whole raw truth that Richard was legally married, that he had blatantly lied, claiming he was separated, that he had promised to take care of her and the baby. But when he was arrested, she completely panicked, decided to have an abortion. Her family exposed everything publicly on social media. They made long posts, angry stories, accusatory videos. Richard's name was completely destroyed. His friends started to distance themselves. His own family began to feel ashamed, not wanting the association. Vera, even from her ICU bed, sent a harsh message through her daughter Brenda. "That boy has deeply disappointed me. I don't recognize him anymore." And it was at that precise moment, when he had no one left by his side, that the final devastating twist happened. Mr. Andrews received a mysterious anonymous email. Inside the email was an attached file, a scanned PDF of an old yellowed document. It was an old deed, a deed to a large piece of land in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley that belonged to Richard's grandfather. When he died in 2008, it was officially left to Richard and his brothers. Except this land was never declared in the official probate, never legally divided, and over the years it had appreciated greatly. Today it was worth about $600,000, and Richard owned 33% of it, about $200,000. He had criminally concealed it. Mr. Andrews smiled with satisfaction when he saw it and said, "Whoever sent this to me is either an angel or a mortal enemy of your ex-husband. Either way, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that we now have yet another irrefutable proof of concealment." When this was officially added to the case file, it was definitively over. Richard's unprepared lawyer asked to be immediately removed from the case. He was left completely defenseless. He had to hire a court-appointed lawyer, the kind the state provides for free. And that lawyer, poor guy, did what he could with what he had, but there wasn't much to be done in the face of so much evidence. The final divorce decree came down in March 2025. I was awarded 80% of the marital estate. 80%. The condo was officially appraised at $950. 0, 0, 0, 0. 80% of that is $760, 000. I offered him the choice. Either I kept the entire condo and paid him his share in cash, $190, 000, or we would sell it and divide the money proportionally. He chose to sell because he desperately needed liquid cash. The condo sold quickly in 45 days for $920, 000. I received $736, 000 clean. He received $184, 000. From that amount, he had to pay his lawyer the exorbitant court costs and the debts he had accumulated. He was left with a miserable $30, 000, less than what he used to spend on his mistresses in a year. I got to keep the car entirely. The land in the Hudson Valley was uncovered, and Richard was legally forced to declare and sell his share. He received $180, 000 from that sale after taxes and fees. But from that amount, he had to pay me $70, 000 as compensation for the dissipation of assets and criminal concealment. In the end, after everything, Richard ended up with about $140, 000. I ended up with over $1.2 million, counting my grandmother's inheritance, that he never knew about the money from the condo, my share of the land, and the car. But more important than all the money I ended up with, my dignity intact. The last time I saw Richard was on the day we signed the sale deed for the condo at the title company's office. It was a cold April morning. He arrived in an Uber wearing faded jeans and an old worn-out jacket. I arrived in my car, the Civic that had been his and was now legally mine. We went into the office, signed the papers in complete silence. The closing agent read everything, stamped it, officially registered it, and when he was finished, Richard looked at me and said, "Defeated, you won, Patricia. Congratulations." I looked at him, and for the first time in 18 years, I felt no anger, no resentment. I felt absolutely nothing. Emptiness. "This wasn't about winning or losing," I said calmly. "It was about justice. And about me finally respecting myself." He opened his mouth to say something, but gave up. He simply turned his back and limped away. I stood there holding my copy of the documents, and I realized my hand wasn't shaking. My heart was calm. I was at peace. I walked out of the title office, got in my car, turned on the radio to a song I liked, and just started driving. No specific destination, I just drove. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt genuinely free. Today, January 2026, 1 year and 3 months after that dinner in Soho, my life is completely different, unrecognizable. I live in a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights near my work. It's smaller than the old condo, but it's mine. All mine. I personally chose every piece of furniture, every wall color, every piece of art. There are no bad memories here, only peace. My career continues to go extremely well. I was promoted again. I'm now the general purchasing manager for the entire Northeast region. I earn $180,000 a year. I travel a lot for work, meet new and interesting people, and face daily challenges that motivate me. In my free time, I've picked up hobbies I had abandoned years ago. I went back to dance classes. I always wanted to learn the tango, and now I go 3 times a week. I joined a gym not to look good for anyone else, but because it feels good, it gives me energy. I've lost 20 pounds. I've gained muscle and stamina. I've let my hair grow out naturally. I've started wearing colorful, cheerful clothes. I've become a version of myself I hadn't seen in 20 years. My parents, who are now 72 and 70, are immensely proud. My mother cried when she visited my new apartment and said emotionally, "I knew you could do it, sweetheart. I always knew you were strong." My father, a man of few words, just hugged me tightly and whispered, "That guy never deserved you." Claudia, my friend, is back in my life in a big way. We see each other every week for dinner, movies, or just to talk for hours. She introduced me to a group of incredible women, all with stories similar to mine. Brave women who left abusive relationships, who rebuilt their lives, who found themselves. I don't feel alone. As for romantic relationships, I'm not ready yet. And that's okay. I don't need anyone to complete me. I'm already whole. But I'm not ruling out the possibility either. Only now, if someone comes into my life, it will have to be someone who adds to it, not diminishes it. Someone who respects me, not just tolerates me. Someone who sees my value, not someone who tries to take advantage of it. About Richard, I know very little. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's living with his mother, who recovered from the stroke but has permanent complications. That he's working as a salesman in an electronics store, earning about 1.5 times the minimum wage. That he's alone. That he tried to get back with Jessica, but she's engaged to a minor league baseball player and didn't even reply to his messages. That he's gained weight, is depressed, and takes prescription medication. I don't feel pity. I don't feel joy. I simply feel nothing. He is a turned page, a closed chapter, a life I left behind. I learned so much from all of this. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. I learned that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I learned that I am stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that money does matter because it provides freedom and the power to choose. I learned that justice exists even if it takes time. I learned that revenge isn't about hatred, it's about dignity. And I learned that it is never, ever too late to start over. Today I look back and see the woman I was in that restaurant in Soho listening to my husband humiliate me in front of everyone. And I barely recognize that person. She seemed so small, so lost, so broken. But she wasn't broken. She was gathering her strength. She was preparing. And when the time came, she stood up and she didn't look back. If you are reading this, if you are going through something similar, I want you to know you are not alone. I know it seems impossible. I know it feels like there's no way out. I know he has convinced you that you are nothing without him. But you are. You are everything. You just need to believe it. And when you do believe it, when you decide you've had enough, you will see that you are stronger than anyone who tried to diminish you. You are stronger than any humiliation. You are stronger than fear. And you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to start over. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter how much time you think you've lost. It doesn't matter what you think you've sacrificed. It's never too late. Never. If this story touched your heart, if you identified with any part of this journey, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what moved you the most. Share this video with that friend, cousin, or neighbor who needs to hear this message. Dignity is non-negotiable. Self-love comes first, and it's never ever too late to start over. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories. Because here we don't just tell empty stories. We tell stories that transform, that heal, that remind you of who you truly are. A strong, capable woman, deserving of all the love in the world. A tight hug to your heart, and remember you are stronger than you imagine. Until next time,